Yes, good morning and welcome to the best On Ground Weekday Kickoff, a brand new show which we started this week, designed to help you know what's happening in the world of sport. First thing every weekday morning. My name's Pete Fairbairn and I'm your host, and I'm joined by one of Australia's top journalists every single day of the week. And today we've got Sam Bruce from ESPN. How are you going, Brucey?
I'm well, Pete. Thanks for having me on, mate. Great to be here. Love the new concept and, as ever, plenty happening in the world of sport.
Well, there is, and let's rip straight into it. And the biggest story, not only in Australian sport, but world sport right now, is that our country and our mates in New Zealand have been chosen as the bid winners for the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup. Fantastic news there to see such a huge tournament head down under. Your colleague Joey Lynch in ESPN FC there has written a great yarn about the nerves, the anxiety, and the sheer relief when that was announced this morning about 2 a.m. our time. 22 of the 35 votes going to the Australia-New Zealand bid ahead of the Colombia bid. Mate, talk me through how big this is for the country in terms of not just women's sport, but all sport in general. I mean, I put it out there on my Twitter yesterday. I think this is the biggest tournament to come to Australia since the 2000 Olympic Games.
I think it probably is, Pete. Certainly some stuff I read earlier in the week claiming the Women's World Cup is actually bigger than the Rugby World Cup in terms of viewing, and that was reinforced this morning again. I saw, look, it's huge for the country, isn't it? It's great. It's a World Cup. Certainly the last few Women's Football World Cups I've really enjoyed, maybe more so from the men, just from the open style of play. And, certainly the Matildas last time around had a bit going on off the field, probably ruined their campaign a little. But this is just huge for not just football fans, but for Australians. I think, we've all been to the Cricket World Cups and Rugby World Cups here in the past and certainly got a sense of just what it's like to have a big international tournament in your own backyard. And same goes for New Zealand. Obviously, it's been a busy few years for them coming up with the Women's Rugby World Cup as well over there. And, it's certainly here in Australia. Why can't we win this one? We know the strength of this Matildas team. Sure, they've had a few ups and downs in recent times, as we mentioned, but this is a quality side. They've got that real brand authenticity now, that emotional investment from the Australian sporting fans. They're right up there basically as the number one team in the country. So, yeah, can't wait.
And for those of you watching this on Facebook or YouTube, you'll see I've held up the golden strainer. That's our way of making sure we fire through our 5 topics nice and quickly. That's right, mate. Off to an absolute flyer. And let's just hope the Matildas deal with that home pressure a little bit better than someone like Sam Stoser, because we know having the nation absolutely on your back or huge expectations is pretty tough, and that's going to be huge. But fantastic news there for football fans and Australians and New Zealanders in general. Not so good from a New Zealand perspective is our second story today, which is from Brent Reid in The Australian. Talks to the New Zealand Warriors rugby league team. Of course, they've been in a hub over here in Australia for quite some time now. Their coach, Stephen Kearney, got sacked last weekend, and now reports from Brent Reid that 3 of their players are potentially looking to head back to New Zealand if Peter V'landys and the NRL can't come up with a way to get their families over here and into the hub with them. These guys are obviously really struggling with the environment and missing everybody back home. Mate, are the Warriors in complete disarray, and is it their fault?
No, it's not their fault. I think it was a huge ask for them to come over here and spend their time indefinitely in Australia so that the NRL season could go ahead at the start of the year there, and full credit for them for doing that. They moved to Tamworth, as we all know, and settled in there and served their quarantine, being able to train at the same time. Then began the season with that good win over the Dragons, but things have certainly slipped away a little bit from there. Of course, that big loss to the Rabbitohs last weekend, and then the sacking of Stephen Kearney, which, look, I know that's par for the course in rugby league. It's a very much a take-no-prisoners kind of style of environment when it comes to coaching and success in particular. But, geez, I thought that was harsh, really tough on a guy who turns out had been away from his family for a lot longer than that, who are based in Brisbane as well. So, look, I certainly wouldn't hold anything against the Warriors if they just said, no, this is all too much, packed up and wanted to go home. If they can't get these families across, Peter V'landys worked a lot of miracles so far, so maybe he's got one more in him. But, look, I really feel for the Warriors. I think they're everyone's second team in Australia here at the moment. But certainly you couldn't blame them for just saying, look, no, we want to go home, and if they can't get the families here, and I think that'd be fair enough.
huge amount of pressure on athletes in general, let alone away from home in an unfamiliar environment, away from your families. And just the outpouring of emotion around the removal of Stephen Kearney is fairly unprecedented from, sackings that spring to mind across all sports, that genuine shock, genuine disappointment from, his assistant coaches to the players, and obviously the actions of the private owner here in the case of the Warriors. We'll move on to, rugby league in a sense. I was going to say we'll move from the 13-man code to the 15-man code, but it's actually the 14-man code we're moving to. What an absolute shot out of left field this one was yesterday. Peter Bedell in the Courier Mail breaking the story that negotiations are underway for the All Blacks to play a match against the Australian Kangaroos rugby league team in December this year. Brucey, talk me through this. Where do we start?
Oh, Pete, this old chestnut comes up in various personas over the last few years. I did have to laugh when someone flicked it to me on Facebook before I'd actually seen the story. Of course, had to click and read it. Look, do I think it will happen? Probably not, but in these crazy times of ours, you certainly wouldn't rule it out this year potentially being the year where something like this does actually happen. We saw what looks to be the kind of rules for this game, a schoolboy game a few years ago. It must be 7 or 8 years ago now, between, I believe it was St Augustine's and on the North Shore here in Sydney, Northern Beaches, and Keebra Park High School from the Gold Coast. And to be honest, the interest in that, I was actually working at Fox Sports at the time, and we streamed that game, and there was a lot of people keen to get on and check it out as a one-off. Was it a great spectacle? Look, certainly I didn't think so. And to me, the way these rules are set up, if it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck, it's probably rugby league. Certainly on paper, no lineouts, no pushing in the scrums, 8 drives on mauls essentially being before the ball is turned over, or teams are able to turn it over. I'm still not quite clear on that part, but look, you end up with essentially, from the All Blacks point of view, I think you probably end up with a forward pack that looks a lot like Artie Sevilla and Sam Cane and these guys, and you take out your Sam Whitelocks, etc., and your front row is Joe Moody and co. So yeah, look, mate, I'm sceptical, but as a one-off, I don't think we really need to see it, to be honest.
Yeah, if there was a year you could do it, it might be the year. But in saying that, there's also people who would suggest it's a bit disrespectful to the Wallabies from the Australian Rugby League or NRL negotiating with the All Blacks. We understand the global pull of the All Blacks jersey, but I also would have thought if they played this against the Wallabies, that also generates a fair degree of global interest. Would you agree with that?
Oh, for sure. And to me, look, the Kangaroos, Mal Meninga, he's trying to attach the brands to the mega brand that is the All Blacks, and has that real reach across the world. No matter where you are, people understand that the All Blacks are a rugby team, and they are pretty much the rugby team at this stage. They're not world champs anymore, certainly, but they're still regarded as the team you want to beat in world rugby.
We'll move on to our penultimate story, and it's in the Daily Telegraph. Ben Horn reporting in regards to cricket and the broadcasting rights for what's currently scheduled for October, the ICC T20 World Cup in Australia. I think it's pretty clear that's not going to go ahead, and that'll be rescheduled for some point in time. However, the sticking point, according to Horn's article, is that the broadcasters are yet to agree to a postponement, and that there's potentially the opportunity there for the broadcasters to get out of their obligations to pay $15 million in Channel 9 being the free-to-air broadcaster here in Australia, using that force majeure clause to get out of that if it were to be moved from those original dates. I want to talk more broadly about broadcast deals in general. We know they're going to get smaller and smaller in sport, and we've probably seen the peak. That was happening before COVID. It's certainly going to happen post-COVID. So how are sporting organisations going to make up for that gap in revenue to ensure their long-term commercial viability?
Well, they've got to get creative, haven't they? They've got to uncover new revenue streams. It's not going to be easy because they've just become so used to going back to the broadcasters after every 4 or 5 years and saying, look, this is what we're after. This is the increase we want. And up until now, they've been getting it. Now, we know even before COVID, Channel 7 and Channel 9, certainly here in Australia, had indicated that they weren't going to pay similar increases to what they had previously for the NRL and AFL. Obviously, cricket had the shake-up with its last rights deal leaving Nine after so many years with the Nine network and going across to Channel 7 and Fox Sports as well. So, yeah, look, it's for those guys, the suits at the top. That's going to be their job over the next little while. They're aware of that this isn't going to be the case going forward, and certainly in the case of this T20 World Cup, why wouldn't Channel 9 seek the ability to not pay the full freight, if you like.
Yeah, I think we're likely to potentially see in some sports kind of the growth of the franchise player, different competitions in different parts of the world at different times rather than full retainers. We've seen that already a little bit in cricket. We may see an increase in that space. Rugby union, another sport that you wouldn't be all that surprised if it eventually went down that path. We won't go there today though, Brucey. We're going to finish off stateside with an article by Ken Belson in the New York Times about the Washington Redskins, who are clinging to their controversial team name. There's been a lot of chat about that for a long, long time, and as to whether it's disrespectful to Native Americans or a racist term. Certainly in the Black Lives Matter spotlight of the last month, that's come to light even more so. They want to cling to their name. However, they have taken down kind of the statue and any mentions of their original owner, George Preston Marshall, who is known as the last, his team being the last franchise to integrate its roster. And we've seen a lot of statues taken down worldwide where people might have racist links in their past. I want to talk about the Redskins name though. Should they just change the name and we can all move on? I feel like this one comes up every 12 months. Yeah,
it certainly does, Pete. Look, they've stood strong so far. You have to think that it is going to happen. And certainly during this Black Lives Matter environment that we're in at the moment, and rightfully so, that the pressure is going to come right on across the board. So we saw last year the Kansas City Chiefs, the Super Bowl champions, had to work with the local cultural authorities down there over their chop that they've used in the stands there. Chief Wahoo of the Cleveland Indians, that logo has been removed. So it's I'd say it's certain that at some point the Redskins will have to change their name, whether it's going to require a change in ownership or strong pressure from the NFL owners committee to get that done. Because certainly the environment out there in the general public is that name should be changed.
Yeah, we saw it a little bit in our own backyard last year with the Crusaders obviously changing their logo in the aftermath of the mosque attacks in Christchurch and the links with the Crusades there. Brucey, we've ripped through some cracking content, mate. 5 big stories to start your morning, and as always, I've been able to rely on my guests to provide the insight and the opinion, which really kind of sparks up the conversation, and hopefully for the listeners and watchers out there, it gives them a really good insight into the world of sport first thing in the morning. Mate, I want to thank you so much for your time. I also want to thank Christy Doran, Julian De Stoop, Beth Newman and Vince Rigari, my other guests this week for the first week of the Best On Ground Weekday Kickoff. It's a lot of fun. The feedback's fantastic, and we're going to keep pushing it out. Brucey, I'm going to have you back again in the future if you can, mate.
Mate, my pleasure. Anything.
Fantastic. So there we have it. That's the wrap today for Friday, the 26th of June, 2020 for the Best On Ground Weekday Kickoff. You'll find us on Facebook, YouTube, and in your podcast app, as well as on Spotify. Have a great weekend. Watch some sport.